This month's worldwide general membership meeting will be featured as Readers and Writers Book Club Sci-Fi Fantasy Horathon. Be prepared to be afraid, very afraid. Greetings, I'm Evan Swenson. I'm an author and a book publisher. I'm also a member of Author Masterminds, sponsors of Readers and Writers Book Club. Welcome to Readers and Writers Book Club. This is the worldwide online general membership meeting of Readers and Writers Book Club, rapidly becoming the book club destination for all readers of good books. Thanks for being here. Today's membership is represented online by Author Mastermind members and other book club members participating on Facebook Live. I hope you'll find every reader is a friend and every author is approachable. Once again, welcome to Readers and Writers Book Club. Of course, we'll be conversing about books, authors, writing, and the magic and miracle of reading. Okay, let's meet today's co-hosts. Okay, let's meet today's co-hosts. That's going to be fun. We talked a little bit before we came on the meeting, and we already had some fun.
Yes, we did.
we've got three. I shouldn't say it like, I don't know how to say this and have it come out right. We don't have three scary authors that we're talking about. We have three authors that write about kind of scary stuff. So anyway, we're going to be visiting with them today, and they're going to start out by telling us about the world that they created, because the world that they write about is not really the world that we live in. They've created their own world, and that world is somewhat scary at times. So let's begin with the youngest member of Author Masterminds, Mary Flint. Mary, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and the world that you created as a sci-fi writer, scary. You're not a very scary person, by the way, Mary. So talk to us and tell us about the world in which you created.
Hello, I'm Mary Flint, creator of Breathtaking Worlds and Heart-Racing Adventures. I currently write science fiction, and I created my own planet and culture called Rendaria. And Rendaria is a planet where the surface is covered in barren wastelands, part of it desert and part of it Arctic tundra. And the inhabitants of Rendaria have now moved underground into a single city that is divided into 10 levels, and each level has a specific purpose. So like level 4 is food production, level 3 is technical science, so on and so forth. Each level is presided over, I guess you could say, by a chairperson, but the entire planet is ruled by the chairman, along with REGS, the Rendarian Enforcement of Global Security, which is like Rendaria's military and police force.
That's the area in which, that's the planet. You really did create your world. Yeah. Well, we'll just keep you there for a moment, Mary, and then we'll go to Syl. Now, Mary, you're in the south. Syl's in the far north, and then we'll go back to the south and come with Mary Ann. So, Syl, you tell us about your world.
I'm Syl Gregoire, Alaska Sci-Fi Queen. Hello, everyone. My story is both on Earth and on a distant world. It takes place in the present, but it all started 12,000 years ago through a time-space warp that was created when a catastrophic event on this distant world called Ea occurred, and a dark crystal was catapulted back to Earth. And it contained the formidable powers and evil essence of Drachlim. And Drachlim is a very, very scary, evil event. Fearing for Earth's future, Anthea searches for the dark orb on Earth to destroy it, but it's never found. And so she brings to Earth the Oracle of Light in the form of a crystal. And its purpose is to combat Drachlim's evil. But Earth is 12,000 years ago. Civilization was very primitive then and just forming. And so the crystal was hidden in a glacier in what we now know as Alaska. And of course, if we come to the present time, we have the global warming, temperature change, and the glaciers are receding in Alaska. And this crystal has been unearthed, or it has come out of the glacier, and it flows down the Susitna River. And it's found by Raven, who is here with me today. Say hello, Raven. Walk, walk. And here's the crystal that Raven pecked out of the Susitna River and took it to Rollis, a young woman who is an artist who bought a log cabin in the woods, thinking that she was going to work on her art and in peace and tranquility. But we are not alone. And I have a lot of Alaska experience. So what I do is I offer you the complete Alaska spirit experience. But even our government now is close to it conceding what many of us have always suspected, that we are not alone in this universe, and contact is made.
Okay, so I like that. Thank you. Okay, let's go back south, back to Texas. Mary Ann Paul.
Well, hello, I'm Mary Ann Paul, true. I'm America's Lady of Supernatural Thrillers. The world I create is actually on this earth, but you get an insight into the invisible realm of the supernatural. So it's a realm where demons, angels, and spirits dwell. These books bring to life those invisible beings. So what you have is an area where it's like two worlds are colliding, two dimensions collide. And I have some wonderful characters. These books, 3 out of the 4 of them are based in Alaska. And the characters are all running throughout those books. And these characters are Alaska characters. Now, if you understand being in Alaska, you understand what I'm saying, because Alaska characters are individuals. They're endearing and sometimes quirky and odd. And I know I was there for 40 years and it was my home, and I am quirky and odd. So, I know what we are talking about. And it's Ravens Cove is a fictional town that's based in South Central Alaska, which is my favorite area because it's around it's based around Homer Anchor Point area, which is where I love to be. So what you have are, people tell me that I'm look like a Sunday school teacher. And when I tell them I write supernatural thrillers, and that my author masterminds friends tell me that my books are really scary, these people look at me like, yeah, right. And they take a book. And the next time I see them, they really look at me oddly, like, you know, they don't want to meet me in a dark alley, oddly. So I just find it interesting that they think I can write, they think I'm writing fluffy supernatural thrillers. And my books aren't fluffy. They're very action packed. There's a tiny bit of romance that runs through it, but you know, really the focus is on the battle between good and evil, which is ugly. So that's about all I can say about mine right now. Hello. I will say we have some comments over here already.
Okay, what's your
Joanna Onanik, sorry, Joanna, says hello all. She loves sci-fi, fantasy, etc. Victoria Hardesty says, and she's so sweet, she loves Mary Ann Paul's stories and Syl Gregoire's too. They are different, but grabbed you the minute you begin to read them. Thank you, Victoria.
Okay, well, let's go back to Texas. Thanks, Mary Ann. I'm anxious to talk with Mary Flint and ask her a question. I got a question, Mary, that I've been waiting to ask you. But first, I just want to mention that Steve Levi, another Author Mastermind member, is here with us today. He's going to have some questions for you three scary authors of scary stuff, whatever it is. And DB Cooper, Walter Grant, whatever he is today, is here, and he'll probably have some questions. So I'm going to ask the first question, and then Steve and DB, you jump in. And of course, Mary Ann, Paul, and Syl, if you want to ask a question of Mary or either other, whatever, let's just have fun and jump in. So the question that I have for you, Mary Flint, is that you're the youngest member of Author Masterminds. You were really young when you wrote your book, and it was published, I think 16 years old. And so the question I have, as a 16-year-old, associating with other 16-year-olds that see you as a published author, what has been the most unusual experience you had associating with other teenagers when you're a published author?
I think I wouldn't really call it strange, but it was kind of fun. I did an event down here called Teen Book Fest by the Bay, which, as the name would suggest, it's an event where they bring in authors, and it's called Teen Book Fest, but pretty much kids of any age come. But there are a lot of teenagers, and I was about 18 at the time. And at the end of the event, they had all of us authors in a signing area, and so everybody could come through and get autographs or just ask questions. And a couple times I'd have a group of teenagers come to my table and say, like, "You look really young." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm 18. They'd be like, "No way." Which I think it was, and I had one girl come up to me afterwards who was 13, and she was all excited because she had decided that she was going to publish her book too and not wait. So I thought it was pretty fun.
All right, thank you, Mary. Steve and DB, or Mary Ann and Syl, either one of you, do you have a question, comment, whatever with the Mary Flint?
Yeah, Mary, I got a question for you. If all of these people are living in this underground, and you said that one of the floors is for developing food, what are they eating? What kind of food are we eating that comes in a cave?
Well, it doesn't look like a cave. They eat fruits and vegetables just like us. They raise animals, but everything it's like living in a greenhouse, basically. So level 4 is basically a greenhouse / farm. That's all it is. That's its sole purpose.
Does it have access to the sunshine so that the vegetables will grow?
They have fake sunshine. It's called, each level has enormous lights on the ceiling called sunlight. So they mimic what their natural sunlight would do.
Okay, this is just like, but it's not real sunlight. It's artificial sunlight, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like giant light bulbs.
Okay, what powers it though? I mean, you got to have some kind of power system in there to get them to operate. What's the power that operates it?
I haven't detailed out the power source, but I imagine that they either harness power from the core of the planet itself, or they generate it through either fuel or like propellers. That's on level 6, by the way.
Moving water, couldn't they harness the power of the moving water to go ahead and, run power? That's been going on since the Egyptians.
That could be a way to do it too.
Okay. Okay.
Mary, you'll notice. Mary, you'll notice that Steve was going to ask questions until he stumped you.
Yeah.
So he would not quit until you says, I don't know. So I'm surprised you let up when you says, I don't know, but maybe they can.
Here in Florida, we have, or had, I suppose they're all have transitioned to different worlds or wherever now. But there were a group that moved out into, what's it called, the Forgotten Coast. And they believe that we live inside the earth. They had instruments to prove it. Matter of fact, I stayed with, well, I didn't stay with them, but I stayed in their park that it had been, the state had authorized it to be a memorial. And these ladies, there were 3 of them there still, and they could live out their life there, and then it became property of the state. But they had elaborate things to prove that we lived inside the earth. I don't know, have you run across those? Any of you ladies run across those people?
No, but you're getting more scary by the minute, Walter. You're in a good group right here now.
No, this is fact. This is not fiction. This is fact.
So you got a name of this group that we can all get in contact with to find out if we truly live in the center of the earth or not?
Well, Charlene kept a diary on all our travels, so she may have it someplace. But no, it was an interesting. They built a road on pylons to get out there so they wouldn't be bothered. Nobody would interfere with their lives.
So, anyway, I'm not going to comment anymore, Walter, about that. Your time was last month. So, Marianne, Paul, let's go to you. I have a question for you, and I've asked you this question in jest a little bit from time to time, but now I want to ask you this question serious. Okay. And that is that your husband, John, I know him to be a kind, gentle man, but is there ever a time when he says, Marianne, I'm not sure that I want to come to bed with you because of the things that you write? Any time that there's a disturbance between you and John because of your writing?
Well, he has, when I first came home with the book on poisons, he did give me a really funny look. And then he has said to other people, but not directly to me, but in front of me, he has said, I do sometimes wonder who I'm sleeping beside at night. But he is a brave man, although gentle and kind. He is very brave. So every night he comes and sleeps in our bed. And so far he's awakened every day.
What about tranquilizers? Is there tranquilizers in the medicine cabinet at your house that John's got his name on it?
No, but see, John married me because John, is very, very stable and calm. And we know I'm not. So I keep his life very interesting. And I think he likes it that way. So when I started writing these, He didn't realize who he'd married at first, but he's gotten over it. He's better. He knows I'm just Stephanie King. So we're good.
All right. Well, that was good. Thank you. I have a higher appreciation for John now. Sil, Steve, DB, and Mary Flint, this is your opportunity to get even a little bit, you know. So you have any questions for Mary Ann?
Mary Ann, I just tell you, I had read some of your stuff to do the reviews, and I have a hard time getting to sleep at night, you know, and it's just kind of like,
I know.
like I have no idea where this stuff comes from. I'm pretty solid. You know, the spookiest thing in my life is reading about serial killers or something. These are real people, but you take my point of interest, you know, and you drag it out to some place that I have no idea. I have no idea how you got there to make that. I have no idea how you develop your ideas. That's a better question, is how do you actually develop your ideas? Do you wait to find something that scares you and then write about it?
It's something that interests me or is unique usually, yes. So like, you know, the hag tree that's in Raven's Cove, and actually pretty much throughout the series, except in the last book, the hag tree really came from a tree in Anchor Point that was just the scariest looking tree I had ever seen. So it looks like a hag, you know, it has arms and everything else that went with it, and a little top knot for a head. And I went inside, and I remember going into our RV and starting to sketch it out, and all of a sudden Raven's Cove was born. And that's how, I mean, and then I just go from there. I walk it with my characters. So I know what I'm doing, and I have a plot, but literally my characters surprise me most of the time, even the bad characters. I never know how bad they can be until they come along and start getting really tacky.
Well, what's this about a therapist? Are you saying that your own writing has driven you to consult a therapist?
A therapist? Who, me?
I thought that's what you mentioned just a minute ago.
No, I don't think I did. I think that actually probably writing is my therapy. Aren't we glad I'm putting it in a book?
Mary Ann, you've been to a lot of book signings, I know. And you have now you have what, 3 books out? 4 books?
I have 4 books out.
4 books. You're an experienced author. You've been around a little while. What is the most interesting event that you have had at a book signing? When you were there talking to a person face to face, what has been the most interesting event that you've had, conversation, whatever, with someone that has been a reader, wants to be a reader, or just doesn't believe you, or whatever? You tell us what it is.
Well, I think the most interesting one was the one that who bought my books and who happened to be a cashier at Fred Meyer in Alaska. And that was my most interesting one, because she looked at me, remembered me, and if you've been in a book signing, it's hard to remember the people. There's so many of them at times. But she looked at me, she said, "How do you sleep at night?"
Yeah, I got that. I can understand.
You get that. And I answered her and I said, I sleep really well. Why? Thank you. And then it dawned on me. She said, because I've read your books and I don't know how you sleep at night. So I thought, okay, well, they're doing what they're supposed to do then.
Oh, was the question then I have, was that a compliment or a complaint?
She said I think she said she liked the books. This was several years ago, but it sure stuck in my brain. And she didn't stop reading them. So I think it was a compliment. Well, to me it was. I just think she was actually very curious. Before I wrote these books, I would have asked Stephen King, how do you sleep at night? Because his stuff scares me.
What makes you think he does sleep at night?
You're right. I haven't ever asked him. That's a good point. Maybe that's why he's got those little black circles under his eyes. Yeah.
Okay, Mary Flitz, it's your turn to ask the big question of Marianne Paul.
I mean, you've probably been asked this before, but why did you choose Supernatural?
Actually, Supernatural chose me, but I've always loved the supernatural. And so since I was a young girl, I have researched the supernatural. And I was going to write mysteries. I was going to write murder mysteries, Steve. And I started a murder mystery, and it's on chapter 3 and will never come out again. But I got a lot from it. So when I sat down to write Raven's Cove, I thought it was going to be a mystery. And all of a sudden, these demons and things were showing up in it. So it became supernatural as opposed to a murder mystery. I thought I was going to do Agatha Christie. No. So I write thrillers, not mysteries. It really did, that genre found me.
Yeah, I can ask
questions, comments.
I mean, where do you come up with these people? Because all of a sudden, I mean, when you start doing supernatural, you know, there are no leads to where you can jump from logical and rational to the irrational. I mean, with this, you're just zoning out there. So how do you get yourself to zone out there to find something new and unique in your own field?
Well, you know, it has to be, I don't know how that happened per se. I just know that in order to write a good story, your characters have to be great characters. You can probably put almost anything around a character if you have really believable, endearing characters. So, or ones that scare you to death, like, you know, Iconoclast. He's pretty nasty.
I know which ones you're talking about.
But, you know, for me, I do research, Stephen. You know, a lot of my stories all begin with some type of history, you know, the prologue. And when I start that prologue, that's when I come up with some amazing, that's what makes it unique. Because Anchor Point is named Anchor Point because Captain Cook lost an anchor there. And when I came up with that and I researched Captain Cook, I found out he was not this great, wonderful guy everybody thought he was. So you take somebody and throw them into that situation, and that's how your prologue begins. You've got somebody trying to escape England on Captain Cook's ships, being treated as bad or worse. And then it goes from there, and that's where they develop. Mm-hmm. And my characters literally sometimes develop as I am creating the book. Grandma Bricken, a lot of people's favorite character, literally did not show up in the book until I started writing it. Mm-hmm. So how do you be unique? You put in, here's a question. How can Alaskans not be unique? So literally, that's how it becomes a unique book. It's the character becomes unique.
Well, we have a lot of unique characters up here, that's for sure.
I was one of them, I know. I want to ask Syl how she writes about two worlds and doesn't get them confused. That's what I want to ask.
Well, Alaska is my home, has been my home most of my life. I was a very young wife and mother when we first came here, and now I'm an old great-grandmother. I don't get them confused because they're so different, for one thing. My Alaska side of the story is so based on my own experiences here. I've done it all. I came to Alaska for adventure, and that is one thing Alaska has to offer, and that's adventure, whether you're looking for it or not. And so I use all my Alaska experiences for a great Alaska adventure story, even if you took the sci-fi out of it. But the other world I created, it's got its own problems, it's got its own good, it's got its own evil. and it was brought to Earth, and it's playing out in our field, in our territory, and we can't ignore it. We have to deal with it, and that's what this story is all about. It is a book about good versus evil, like so many of our stories are. And we have some great characters, and they're just as unique as Alaskan characters always are. And the ones that are from another world are just as unique and original. It comes together pretty good. I keep an exciting plot going. There's always so much going on. I've been told that it's hard to put them down once you get started reading them. And here locally, I'm known as this sweet little old lady. I belong to a lot of women's clubs, or I used to go to them before COVID shut everything down. And these fans of mine who read my books and know me, there's some very dark, terrifying scenes in my novels too. And they look at me like, how could you it doesn't fit your image. You're just sweet, this sweet little old lady, and you've come up with these horrible, scary, evil, devious schemes that happen in your novels. It's sort of like what Marianne was talking about. Our characters, they create themselves once we get them started, and all we do is give them life.
We do. I've done background biology. I've done the whole thing on my characters that ended up never using a bit of it. And other ones, I haven't done a thing, and they just become bigger than life.
And I'll set out outlines thinking that I'm going to follow this, but no, the stories take on their own direction. There's no controlling it. You just have to go with what the story is telling you it is.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I just noticed something that I didn't realize until right now. And that is we've got a lot of author mastermind members, and they could be here, but the 6 that are here, me included, 5 are authors, and I'm the publisher, so don't get me confused with a author. But I just realized that we all have an association with Alaska. We've all lived here, and it wasn't by design. So the question I'm going to have to ask, and that is, do you feel, especially you 3 that we're kind of putting on the spot here, do you feel that your Alaska experience enhanced your writing or detracted from it? Or let's talk about your Alaska experience relative to your writing. I think maybe, well, let's ask Mary Flint first. Mary, you were born in Alaska. You're the only one that's got Alaska blood in your genes. The rest of us got transfusions. So tell us, how do you feel about your writing relative to your being born in Alaska and now living, someplace else?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, like Marianne mentioned, there's a lot of interesting people in Alaska, and I lived in Alaska till I was 14, which is a long time for my lifespan of, but I think most of my Alaska experience plays into the second book I wrote. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think just there's so much adventure in Alaska. It was very stimulating to my imagination, I think. Just all the beautiful summers and the mountains and just different people you meet.
Thank you. That was good. I like that. How about Marianne? Sil, what about you?
Well, I'm sorry.
You go first, Sil. Go ahead.
I think Alaska begged to be the setting of a sci-fi novel. I I can't think of a better place to set such a book or a story as I have mine. We have the wide open spaces. We have so many opportunities for alien life to exist here without us knowing about it. And it just had to be. Alaska was my inspiration.
Okay, thanks. Mary Ann Paul?
Alaska was always my inspiration for writing, always. There is no place that is as mysterious that I'm aware of anywhere. You just walk into the woods in Alaska and you just don't feel like you feel like you're in another world. And it is full of adventure. I mean, there are active volcanoes and bears and moose and anything could take you. And, you know, it's not hard to make that leap to a supernatural thriller when you watch the fog coming in off the water. And I just love, I mean, I miss it so much. I love being where I'm at. I love Texas, but I really miss writing in Alaska.
Alaska also has a heritage of oddness and uniqueness. You start talking to the natives, and the natives have all kinds of supernatural creatures that live out there. And if you know natives, and I've worked with them, some of them, you know, they will talk about experiences that they've had with Nakani, or what you'd call a Bigfoot, and as in they've touched them. And you're talking to somebody who is really a pretty logical, rational person, you know, and they're telling you stuff that you look at them and kind of, well, I'm not sure about that. But, you know, we have a heritage of ghosts that have been recorded up here. We have a heritage of a strange supernatural beings up here. So it's very, I mean, if you want to be in the supernatural world, Alaska is well-grounded, so to speak, and inhabit, and you can, there are lots of actual books out there with footnotes that talk about people who've had these experiences.
I have, in fact, my books are, when I wrote them, when I developed Iconoclast, I literally was working to keep the native taste and theme to those books. And in Ingress, I literally started that book with a native story that I created. But the creatures come from Alaska. And yes, I've read a lot of those stories by the natives, and I've heard many stories too. And I do miss the Alaska people too, the native people themselves, because their stories are astounding.
Well, you also have to understand, for those people who are listening who don't understand Alaska, let me explain something to you. When you get in a plane in Seattle to fly to Anchorage, you will fly for 4 hours. And when you look down, you don't see roads, you don't see houses, you don't see lights, you don't see trails, you see nothing but forest, 4 hours. And then you're only in Anchorage. And then if you want to fly to Fairbanks, you're going to fly for an hour and a half north, and you will see a road and a railroad. And that's it. And then if you want to fly from there to the North Pole, you've got 2,000 miles with nothing below you. So when people talk about what could be out there in the forest, believe me, if you've got 4 hours, if you're looking down from a plane that's flying 600 miles an hour, I don't know how fast planes fly, but I thought, let's take 600 miles an hour, and you look down for 4 hours and see nothing. A lot of things could be in the forest that you know nothing about.
Steve, I think you're just got the plot started for these 3 scary authors.
Darn right. Joanna Onanek has a question, I think. She said, since the discussion has turned to Alaska, she's been watching, she wanted to know if any of you have watched Molly of Denali on PBS. It's obviously a children's show, but most of it, not all of the voice actors are Alaska natives. And she says she's too old for children's shows, but she finds it really interesting. So have any of you guys watched it? I have not.
I haven't, but I've been, you know, there are a lot of young native writers that are up here. And they're beginning to explore, mixing their legend with what's going on in what I call the modern world. And so what happens is that we are, they are beginning to reach into the literature and reach into the artwork. Was when I first got here, there was native artwork and there was everybody else. And now there's a real mix. And when you go in and you start looking at stuff on television, you're finding out that the native artwork and the native point of view is making its way into mainstream. And clearly with Molly, I can't remember that. What you're doing is you're seeing it not only come in with children's literature, but also artwork. And, we had Irene Bedard, who lives up here, was the voice for Pocahontas. And there's an active native community that's beginning to develop films and beginning to develop artwork and digital presentations.
I was thinking, Steve, when you was talking about all these miles, and then you land in Anchorage. And people seem to always be surprised when they get to here to Anchorage. And I've asked people from time to time, in your mind, which is the largest city, Anchorage, Alaska, or maybe another town outside, Bend, Oregon, or some of these places that that people think about, and they're surprised at the size of Anchorage. And so the comment that I have is that Alaska is about 30 minutes from Anchorage. You know what I mean?
Completely agree.
Yeah.
That's the definition I give them most of the time.
That Alaska is 30 minutes from Anchorage?
Correct.
Yeah. But boy, you can, in 30 minutes from Anchorage, you can be in a lot of trouble if you're not protected.
You can be.
Yeah.
I remember when I made my first trip to Alaska, when I got past Fort Nelson, the road narrowed down. This was back in the days before blacktop in that area. And I looked up ahead, I could see nothing but mountains. I looked off the side, there were trees, and I'm thinking, there's no one out there. I'm leaving civilization behind. And that's kind of the feeling I had. And someone said about beings from another world living here. How are we to know they don't?
What makes you think they don't?
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me about Bigfoot in Eastern Washington, I'd kind of go, yeah. You know how many people there are in Eastern Washington? There are lots of people in Eastern Washington. There are lots of communities. There are lots of roads. There are lots of planes flying over. You start talking about Anchorage. When I lived in the 8500 block of 4th Avenue. That's the last block of Anchorage. I could go from there to the North Pole and only cross one road, one. And that would be like 300 miles, about 300 miles north of there. And there's a lot of things that could happen out there that could exist.
Absolutely. Well, I traveled the Dempster Highway a couple of weeks after it was open, and I had to buy fuel from road crews. There was only one place between there and Preston, is that it, on the river, that you could buy anything. And it was quite an experience.
Well, there's a long history of Bigfoot here in Alaska. One in the 1950s was a bunch of Bigfoot that attacked a city. You know, you can find it as Robert Cult, The Strangest Story Ever Told. It's one of those books that you can buy in the store for about 18 cents. But it's been around since the 1950s. And, you know, like, once again, this is Alaska, and a lot of things happen out there in the field that you just cannot explain. You just can't explain them. which is why people like Marianne and Mary Flint still, can go ahead and write books and have people say, there's more than a shred of reality here.
I didn't mean to get this discussion off onto Alaska, but just pointed out the fact that we got Alaskans here. So now the question that begs to ask, I think, and I started asking with Mary Flint, but then kind of dropped it as we got sidetracked. But Sil, obviously, you're still living here, and your stories are based half in Alaska and half someplace else. So Marianne and Paul, let me ask you, your next book, does it have anything to do with Alaska, or your Alaska experience influenced it? How did your living in Alaska for 40 years, how did that affect the writing of your next book?
Oh, big time. I still have my characters. Even though I finished the series, I couldn't let go of the Alaska characters. So literally, they are bringing Alaska with them. And as I'm sitting here, I'm going, I wonder if we're going back to Alaska in this book again. Alaska is really my heart. And even though I want to live where I'm at, I don't know how to explain Alaska. You can live anywhere, but it's different. Either you love it or you hate it. And I loved it, and it becomes a part of you. And so the influence of Alaska, yeah, huge. It's really huge. And I think that's part of why I've been blocking finishing writing the book, is because you can't find the kind of magic other places that, unfortunately, that you can find there, at least for me. Maybe other people can, but I don't. I don't know if I just made sense or not, but
I can understand what you're saying about Alaska. I've lived in, worked in, traveled in, played in more than 30 countries. Alaska is the only place I've ever missed.
And I still miss it. That's what's, I think you always do.
There's a saying that says, now see, I got away from this theme of this meeting and I'm talking about Alaska now. Darn it. But there's a saying that says, once you've been to Alaska, you can never go all the way back home. And there's a truth to that. Yeah.
Well,
any other questions, comments, anything that someone would like to bring up about this scary stuff we've been talking about?
Yeah, we got all mushy.
Well,
so then I'm going to save my last question then for now. And that is, we're going to talk about something scary. So Mary Flint first, Sil second, Marianne Paul third. So as soon as Mary Flint stops, Sil, you jump in. As soon as Sil catches her breath, Marianne Paul, you jump in. And take 1 minute and tell us quickly, what is the most scariest event in your book or your books? So Mary Flint, the most scariest event. We promised people we're going to scare them. Scare them right now.
I'd say in the first book, it's when Edrix and Andresha meet Farah for the first time. And in the second book, it's when Edrix meets the administrator. My villains, I think, are the scariest part of my book, I feel like.
So give us a taste of that. Why were they afraid? What made them scared?
They were afraid of Farah because when she comes in, she's unexpected. And, well, she shoots someone right in front of them and doesn't care a single bit. It doesn't bother her at all. I think the administrator is someone people are afraid of is because he's very manipulative, and he excels at deconstructing the mind.
All right, Sel, jump in.
In my novel, Drocklum and Anthea they were powerful people back on their planet long ago, and the battle that they were in is moved to Earth. And because Anthea brought that crystal to Earth and Rallis took possession of that crystal, she inherits Rallis's powers and abilities, but she is also the embodiment of what Drocklum is trying to destroy. And so Rallis, who now has the crystal, has to eventually face this great evil and try to stop it from taking over the Earth.
Okay, I guess, my books kind of have lots of these kind of scenes in them. So to pick one, right? It's like, okay, I will pick the one from Raven's Cove in the prologue when Sweeney Tilmuth, who is not a good guy in and of himself, is tempted into becoming Iconoclast's first victim in a couple of hundred years in Alaska. So in order to not go into too much of that, just he eats, Iconoclast just not only, he eats the body, but he also eats the soul. So literally there's a lot of terror in those scenes and in that scene when that occurs. So do I need to go into any others, or does that one work for you guys?
I want to sleep tonight, so let's leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The next event, I think scheduled event for Readers and Writers Book Club is coming up on the 20th, I think it is, a Tuesday. I want to just maybe give a little bit about that.
Yeah, I know. There are lots and lots and lots of books out there, but hey, frankly, not a lot of them are worth reading. The problem is you don't know which book is worth your time. If you're like me, you go to the library or the bookstore and come home with an armload of books, but when it comes to something you can really use out of that armload of books, well, you've got zip. Eventually, you'll do what all accomplished writers do. They ask other accomplished writers what books they're reading. And just because you're reading the same books doesn't mean you're going to end up writing the same stuff. As an accomplished writer, all you need is the literary starting gun to go off. Once you've got the right book, there is no way to know where you will end up. On Tuesday, April 20th at 6 p.m. New York time, the three amigos will tell you 6 books they have found important in their writing. Have a listen and bring along your library card.
Fun. All right. Well, I think we'll just end it there today and thank everyone for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you again on the 20th at a Readers and Writers Book Club event. But in the meantime, keep in touch.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.